Welcome to Syndicated Nightmares, where each week we take a deep dive into an episode of Freddy's Nightmares based on the Nightmare on Elm Street film series. This week, hosts Dave and Michelle talk about Season 2, Episode 7, Silence is Golden, directed by Chuck Braverman and written by Jonathan Glassner, and it premiered on November 13th, 1989. And the summary is, after accidentally assaulting a mime, obnoxious radio disc jockey Rick Rake is tormented by the clown. Meanwhile, it turns out that the mime is also a burglar who learns that the last people he robbed were also killed. I guess that's a pretty good summary, except that it conflates mimes and clowns, and those are two different things.
Well, hopefully we don't run into a mime, because apparently they know some sorcery, according to this episode.
Right.
Yeah. So we start off, it says that they're at Springwood High School. They were showing clips of Springwood High School, like the exterior part. And then it goes right into a radio station, like DJ booth. And at first I was like, oh, is this like a high school radio station? Because this guy is way too old to be in high school at doing a high school radio show. So.
Yeah, I thought that too, but then I was thinking, I think what they were going for is just showing like shots around Springwood and, here's the radio show that everybody in town is listening to.
Oh, I didn't get that at all. Okay, but yeah, that's good.
Because he's definitely not a high schooler.
No, not at all. And he has one rockin' mullet. Like, his hair was beautiful.
Yeah. And then, are you familiar with who that actor is?
He looked very familiar, but I couldn't piece him where he goes.
So his name is Jeff Yeager. He's done a bunch of stuff. I'm familiar with him as an actor because he was on the show V with Robert Englund.
Okay.
But his brother is Kevin Yeager, who did Freddy's makeup on a bunch of the movies. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. The last name Yeager sounded familiar, but I didn't know it out of context. I needed like the full Kevin Yeager name. Oh, that's cool. I thought like he was in a whole bunch of TV shows from the 80s or something, and I just couldn't place him.
Oh, I think he was, but
probably, yeah.
But anyway, that's his connection to the Nightmare on Elm Street world.
That's cool. So it starts off with the DJ Rick Rake. He is known for his insults. He just insults everyone. So I think they were kind of like trying to do a Howard Stern, but without the sexualness of it.
Was he? I guess Howard Stern was already around in '89.
Oh yeah, right? Yeah. Oh yeah, Howard Stern. I think he was. He started in the early '80s. I want to say.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, because he also started like in his college radio station, so he had lots of, like, not a big following in the early 80s, but he definitely had his own fans. Yeah, so I got the impression that they were just trying to make him kind of be like Howard Stern with the insults and just didn't give a shit about what he said on air. And he had this thing where he would pull down a rake, since his name is Rick Rake. He would pull down a rake, and that was like, he would say, "You're about to get raked." And that would be like the biggest insult part.
I missed him pulling down the rake at the beginning.
Yeah.
So later on I was confused about why there was a rake in the studio.
Where does rake come from? Yeah, so he pulls down a rake, and then he plays like the xylophone on it or something like that, and he's like, "You're about to get raked," and does all his insults. So anyway, he is doing his insults, and then when it's time for a commercial break, he tells the producer, like, "I don't want to be this guy anymore. I don't want to insult people anymore, because one day it's going to come to bite me in the ass." And the producer, who's like this old white guy in a suit, has like this bag full of mail, and he's like, "No, you have plenty of fans. Look at all this fan mail." And Rick Rake is like, "That's hate mail." And the producer's like, "Fan mail, hate mail, it's all the same."
Right.
And he was just basically trying to point out that if people are talking about you, it doesn't matter what they're saying. All that matters is that they are talking about you, because then you have some type of importance. And I kind of got the feeling like this was Freddy's Nightmares basically giving the big FU to the Bible Belt, who had a big problem with Freddy's Nightmares being on air, and they were like, we don't care what you're saying about us, you're talking about us, you're giving us energy, like yeah, so we can totally feed off your
Oh.
negativity. I kind of got that impression from it, but I could totally be wrong.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't make that connection, but it's true though. I'm sure, like, yeah, people shouting about the show got the show attention and people to watch it.
Oh yeah.
And it's also, it's true for Radio Shock Jock. If people hate you and they're writing angry letters, it's getting your name out there.
Yeah, exactly. Like that whole, I think it's a meme from Pirates in the Caribbean where some guy is talking to Jack Sparrow and he's like, you're the worst pirate I've ever heard of, or something like that, and Jack Sparrow is like, but you have heard of me. And
oh
like,
yeah.
like, it doesn't matter if you think I'm the worst, like, you know who I am. So
and then someone shows up to deliver flowers, but it's really someone sent by somebody he's insulted and comes to punch him in the face.
Some like flower delivery guy. But like you said, the one woman who is the DJ's like backup, like spin girl or something like that, she says that he's Matt the Rat, Mojo's drummer. So whoever the heck that band is, probably one that was just made up.
It was like Mojo Mama was the person he was insulting, and so I guess it was her drummer that showed up to punch him.
That seems like a lot of effort. Who cares?
Right.
Like if you're in show business and you can't handle someone saying mean things about you, then like you're in the wrong occupation completely.
And also to like come into the studio and doing it where like nobody but the studio personnel is going to see it. Like it seems like if two famous people have a rivalry, you'd want to do something public.
Well, this was before like Twitter and social media where you could have it be public. Like I remember in the late 80s and early 90s, it was rumored that Cher and Madonna had beef, and so they were insulting each other like in interviews and stuff. And that's really all that you could do back then, because you didn't have social media to have like, whoever, Kim Kardashian and Taylor Swift, or whoever, those celebrities have, Cardi B and Nicki Minaj, whoever they are, they have their Twitter beef or whatever. But back in the 80s, all you had was like interviews.
I miss those days.
I know.
And then we have Freddy as a radio DJ, and his station is WDED Radio. And he's going through all the records, and they're all dead people. I think he says like Lennon and Presley. And then he says like, Donny Osmond, when did he die? And then throws it over his shoulder. Because Donny Osmond's still around to this day, isn't he?
I think he is, yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it was cute.
Oh yeah, it was funny. So Rick and his girlfriend Sheila are walking around like an outside mall area, and she's
actually I know exactly where they were.
Oh, where
because there was the Dinosaur Fountain. It's the Santa Monica Promenade, 3rd Street Promenade.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, did you go there during any of your LA visits?
I don't think so. Is that Nightmare movie related?
No, but it's a popular tourist site in LA. It's like a 3 blocks of a pedestrian mall that's a couple blocks from the beach in Santa Monica.
Oh, okay. No, when I went, I only had one day that I could dedicate to Nightmare stuff. And I didn't get to see as much as I wanted to, just because of the distance between everything. So,
right.
I saw the bridge from Nightmare 1. I, of course, saw the Nightmare house. I went to the fountain in Nightmare 4. And, of course, is that when I saw Weston Hills with you? Or is that a different trip? I think that's when I saw you. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's when I saw you. Yeah, because the days prior, we were staying at Airbnb in Laguna Beach, and we would drive into LA, and that was when we went on The Price is Right and just did, like, silly
Oh
stuff
yeah.
like that. Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah, so that was fun.
Okay, but yeah, it's not it's not a nightmare related place you'd visit, but it's a
Oh,
popular
okay.
place a lot of
Okay.
people go to when they visit LA.
All right. Yeah, no, I didn't see it. So
Hmm.
anyway, so Sheila and Rick are walking in the Dinosaur Fountain, and Sheila is really worried about Rick getting punched because she's like, it's a punch today, but that could lead to a gun tomorrow, which she kind of has a point.
Hmm.
But Rick assures her, like, I'm on the radio. No one knows who I am. No one knows my face. It's fine. It's totally fine. And then they see
Yeah.
this mime performing in the. Is he on the fountain?
Yeah, or in front of it.
Yeah, so they see this mime performing, and he has a crowd around him, so they stop and watch him perform. He's doing regular mime stuff, not like mind-blowing stuff, but the crowd is just totally taken by him. Like, he's the best mime that has ever mimed ever. So they're just standing there, and a guy standing next to Rick starts looking at him, and he's like, hey, I know you from somewhere. And Rick's like, no, you don't. Stop talking to me. And then he realizes, like, oh, you're the guy from the radio. Like, you talk shit about everybody. Blah, blah, blah.
And then, Rick gets all upset or annoyed. Anyway, and the mime slaps him on the shoulder, and he thinks it's the guy he'd been talking to. So he turns around and punches, and he ends up punching the mime.
Mm-hmm.
And then but the mime seems to be okay with it, and like gets up and gives Sheila a flower, and then they're home, and Sheila is mad at him for it, and I'm on Team Sheila here, because he's like, it was an accident, I thought it was the other guy, and she's like, well, you shouldn't be punching anyone.
You just can't go around punching people, Rick. That's not how the world works.
And she makes him sleep on the couch.
Mm-hmm. And then in the morning, he goes to leave, probably for work, and the mime is waiting for him outside, and he kind of gives his half-ass apology to the mime. But the mime, he's like being all creepy and like miming around him, and like he mimes that he's pulling a knife out of his pocket, like a switchblade. And Rick is like, quit creeping me out, like, I apologize, just quit being weird.
Right.
And he goes to like punch the mime again, but the mime dodges it and then slashes him with his invisible mime knife, but cuts Rick anyway with his invisible knife, which I thought was kind of cool. Like, we have these kind of superpowers. Okay, I'm on board.
And then Rick wakes up, and he's like smashed a candy dish or something that was on the table, and he's cut his hand in real life.
So he goes out to the car for real this time, and he sees the mime in the front yard, but it's kind of like this deja vu thing, and the mime disappears right when Sheila comes out, because there's a package, like a small package that had been delivered. So they open it, and it's the same flower that he had given Sheila at the dinosaur water fountain. And there's a bill inside. It's a doctor's bill for $150 for his x-ray. And
I was thinking, oh, it's cheap x-ray.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Where did you go? And it's apparent that the mime wants Rick to reimburse him for this doctor's bill.
Which is like, he agrees to do it, but when he's talking to Sheila, he's like, well, it was an accident. It's like, it doesn't matter if it's an accident. Like, you caused his injury.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but he agrees that he will pay the bill, and he'll apologize to the mime.
Mm-hmm. Which I think, in all fairness, like, that's the right thing to do.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, definitely. But and then he's on the radio, and he's sort of, giving this soliloquy about how, like, people should deal with their problems better. And then his boss holds up the contract, like, sort of like, you better start talking shit or or you're out of here.
Yeah, one of those gentle reminders, like, this is what I pay you for, not
right.
not to be all nice.
And so yeah, so he starts ranting about mimes and how he wants a city ordinance against them. And then which I don't know, it's like they do like that area where they were, they, you know, there are street performers, but it's not like oh my god, the city's overrun with mimes. Like
Yeah.
it's not something anyone would ever bring up as a problem.
He basically goes back to insulting all mimes and threatens, like what you said, to have the city ordinance against them. Sheila calls into the radio station and she's very upset about his insults and threatens to leave him. And then shortly after, we see that basically the mime has broken into Rick and Sheila's house, but Sheila's like, I don't know, putting away knickknacks or something, like her back is to the door, and so she can't see that the mime is in there. And then he goes back outside, and she goes outside to, I think, like throw something away. She sees the mime in the front yard, and he's like miming like he's digging a hole. But even though he doesn't have a shovel, each time he like tosses the shovel back, dirt flies back behind him.
Yeah.
So I mean, it was cool, but also like, wait, when did these superpowers come to be? Like, what's
right?
Is this mime radioactive? What happened? So I thought that was cool. Like, he's apparently digging this really big hole in their front yard, and so Sheila apologizes to the mime, and he motions for her to like walk forward. And she's kind of hesitant about it, but she finally does. And as she's like joyfully walking towards him, she falls into this invisible hole that he dug in the front yard.
Yeah, and then Rick sort of snaps out of a daydream at the radio station, and he tries calling her, and there's no answer. And so he decides that he's got to run home because it's, you know, he just talked to her 5 minutes ago, and how come she's not answering now?
Mm-hmm.
And then when he gets home, yeah, there's the hole in the ground, and then it's just her hand sticking out of it holding a flower.
And it turns out that the hole is actually a sinkhole that, according to police officers, makes complete and total sense. That's how she died, because, oh yeah, didn't your realtor tell you that this land is full of sinkholes? And like giving him legal advice, like, you could probably sue them for not telling you. You might want to look into that.
Yeah, I don't think that's a thing, like a sinkhole like that that a human could just fall into.
Yeah, I don't think that's how science works.
Right. Because usually when you hear of sinkholes, it's like in the context of buildings, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
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 But yeah, we lost Sheila to a sinkhole.
We did.
Yeah.
What a way to go.
Yeah. And then he says to the cop, like, I need to go see a mime.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, because
right.
the cop is like, you should go see an attorney. And he's like, what I need to see is a mime. He goes back to work because apparently bereavement leave isn't a thing in Springwood. So he goes back to work immediately, and he just goes off while he's talking on the radio. He just goes off about mimes, and they're stupid and they suck, and
he says that people who club baby seals should come to Springwood and club the mimes instead.
Yeah.
which doesn't really make sense because they're clubbing the seals for pelts. So
yeah.
What are they going to get out of clubbing the mimes?
I don't know. So he challenges the mime to come to the radio station and like mano y mano, we'll finish this like men. Like, you know, that's just kind of the tone that he had to it. So the mime shows up and they get into this, what I called a mime fight, where they like, the mime is just acting like he's fighting and he's putting a box around Rick, and then because Rick is in this invisible box, like, he keeps bumping into this invisible wall that's between him and the mime. And I was kind of like really digging this part. Like, hey, this is kind of cool, you know? Like, it's a common theme now in this episode that the mime, just whatever he acts out, like, kind of happens in real life. So I really liked that part. Then for whatever reason, Rick goes to like full force break out of this invisible box that's around him. And instead he runs neck first into the rake that he would use to like rake people with at the beginning of his show. And so it's just like embedded in his throat, and he's just standing there like obviously not saying anything, but just like wide-eyed and like, holy shit, I have a rake in my throat. Like, this could be a potential problem.
Right. And that makes so much more sense now that you mentioned there was the rake at the beginning, because I was just thinking, why is there a rake in the studio?
Then it cuts to his female coworker, whoever she was supposed to be. She now is running the radio show, and she's just slicing and dicing everyone with her insults. And it's being real condescending to Rick, because Rick did survive. However, he lost his voice box because of it, and now he can no longer speak.
Doesn't he get a flower at the end? Oh, someone leaves him a flower in the lobby with a note that says "Silence is golden." So he's still being tormented by the mime.
Yeah. And then Freddy comes on and he starts doing a mime act. And I'm not really sure what the point of it was.
Right. Yeah, I had in my notes like Freddy does a half-assed mime routine. Because he's...
Yeah.
Yeah. And then he says a mime is a terrible thing to waste.
Okay. And then we go into the second half, which is we're following the mime and his life outside of his career, or I guess his day job. We find out he also has a night job. So he's at home taking off his makeup, and his girlfriend, Andy is her name. His girlfriend Andy is in bed, and she starts talking about how she wants a diamond ring. And at first I'm like, oh, she's like one of those needy girlfriends who just wants him to propose. But apparently she has a rather specific 3-carat diamond ring in mind, and it's because they are jewel thieves, and that's what they do. They go and find wealthy people in Springwood and rob them blind. But before we get to that part, I kind of skipped over when they're like making out and canoodling in bed. He talks about how he like loves her body, and he even loves the birthmark on her neck, and it's so cute. And she's just like, "Go get me that diamond ring."
Right. Or it's a pendant that she wants, right?
I thought it was a diamond ring, but okay, yeah.
Oh.
It probably is a pendant, because that's what he ends up getting, I think. Yeah.
And I think like after he wipes off the mime paint at the beginning of the scene, like he's just a regular character. There's no other reference to him being a mime. Like the first half of the episode, he's like this magic mime who can do amazing things, and then the second half, he's just a guy.
He's just a guy named Kip.
And then also this scene, so Andy is naked in bed, and just like in a TV show, they've got to, use the sheets to cover up the person's parts. But the way the sheets are over her are just like the most unnatural. Like nobody in a bed has ever been positioned with the sheets like that. Like there was one sheet that was sort of like covering her torso like a tube top, and then she had another sheet from the waist down.
Yeah.
It just it's just that's not how people lie in a bed.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Well, I will say, and maybe this is getting a little personal, but that's what we do here at Syndicated Nightmares. There are times when afterward, laying in bed and I don't have any clothes on, like only part of my body is cold, so I'll just cover that part with with a sheet, and like if my stomach is like hot or whatever, I'll leave that exposed, and I'll just cover my private parts with the sheet because that's the only part that's cold.
Oh.
So
Oh.
sometimes,
Okay. So,
yeah, sometimes you
so maybe
do.
it is a way people lie in bed.
Yeah, I just cover the parts of me that are cold, and that's it.
Okay. I stand corrected. um, but yeah, so she's got a specific house that that he's supposed to rob. Apparently, like that's their shtick. Is he, goes out and robs houses at night. And so she tells him, and he's also able to open safes. That's one of his talents.
Yeah.
And so she tells him, these are friends of my parents, and they have a wall safe, and they have this pendant, and go get it. Yeah, and so he climbs into the window of their bedroom, which just
like
didn't seem smart. Like
no.
they're right there sleeping. Yeah. But yeah, he climbed right into the room that they were in, and we can see them, sleeping and tossing and turning in bed. And he goes and he finds the wall safe, and it's behind a picture of the two of them, this old couple and a little girl. Yeah, and he uses his stethoscope and opens the wall safe and finds, it's like a cigar box with tons of jewelry and a separate box with the pendant.
And before he takes all the jewels, he apparently puts his signature flower in there, that yellow daisy that he's been leaving everybody all over town. So that made me think like, oh, this guy is totally going to get caught, and now the police are going to know every single house that he has ever robbed because of that stupid flower.
Like the wet bandits in Home Alone.
That's exactly what I thought of. I was like, oh, you are stupid, dude.
Yeah. And also, I guess if his, day job is, he passes out that same flower to people when he's a mime, that's, it's not smart to be dropping hints in his day job about, how he's stealing things at night.
Yeah, I mean, just leave your business card in there,
Right.
Be more obvious about it.
Yeah, but he takes all this stuff back to Andy, and then it's funny because they're about to have sex, and she turns on the radio, and it's like it's the trash talking coworker from the first half, which isn't. No, it's not a romantic thing to listen to on the radio.
No, not at all.
But she says the Daisy burglar has striked again, but the difference is that this time the couple was murdered.
And so, yeah, and he's like, wait, I didn't murder them. And his logic is, the reason why I don't murder the people that I steal from is because in this state, apparently the state of Ohio, burglary is only 5 years, but you get the death penalty for murder. And I kind of wanted to be like, okay, maybe, but each burglary is a separate offense. So however many burglaries you have under your belt, multiply that by 5. So while you may not be getting the death penalty, you will be serving close to life in prison.
That is a good point. I didn't even think of that. But he's right that Ohio is a death penalty state. But then he's like, well, they think the Daisy burglar is a killer, but they don't know I'm the Daisy burglar, so we're all good.
And Andy's like, are you sure you didn't leave any evidence behind? And he's like, no, I'm a mime and I'm awesome. Like, I don't leave anything behind.
Yes.
So then that night when he's sleeping, he kind of has a dream flashback of when he was at the safe, and he thinks like, oh my God, I left my stethoscope in the safe, so I am going to get caught. So he decides to go back to the house through the same window to get the stethoscope, which if he left it there and the cops already know that the people are dead, chances are they already bagged that in evidence, but whatever.
Well, I was thinking maybe they. Well, first of all, it was stupid for him. I mean, it didn't make any sense that he would go back there when it's in like an active crime scene.
Mhm.
But but I was thinking that because the safe was sort of like hidden behind a picture, maybe the cops wouldn't necessarily be looking behind pictures on the wall.
Oh yeah, that's a good point. But I think that they would know this is a wealthy family, so they should look under
Oh,
every like nook and cranny, um,
yeah.
for a possible motive for to kill these people.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, so he goes to get the stethoscope back, and he climbs through the same window as he did before. But lo and behold, the cops are waiting for him, and they arrest him and hang him on the spot. Basically, a
Yes.
noose comes down from the middle of the bedroom, and they hang him with it. And turns out it was just a dream, and he didn't forget his stethoscope. So all is in the clear.
But he's still sort of freaked out, and now he wants to sell all the jewels and leave the country.
Mm-hmm.
And he takes it. So apparently, his regular thing is he takes it to his friend Tom, who runs a pawn shop. He does this after each burglary, and Tom, pays him for the stolen merchandise.
Mm-hmm.
But there's all this heat from the cops because the couple was killed, and Tom says, "Well, I can only give you half."
Yeah, half of what their normal deal is. Could
Right.
could you imagine how funny would it be if just for some reason, Tom, the pawn shop owner, was like on Pawn Stars, and Kip comes in with all his stolen goods, and that's like the day that they're filming, and so that's how he gets caught because
Oh yeah.
the cops like watch that episode of Pawn Stars and they're like, "Hey, isn't that the pendant we've been looking for?"
Right. It didn't. I mean, maybe Tom has some like secret underground network, but it seemed like he wouldn't want to buy that stuff at all because it would be really hard to sell without
Hmm.
getting caught and the cops connecting it to like these are the items from that murdered couple.
Pawn shops are exempt from being charged with receiving stolen property as long as they work with the police, which they do. If the police
Mm-hmm.
find that, oh, this person like robbed so and so of their jewels and brought them to the pawn shop has to give the merchandise back, whatever it is, and then the robber guy is charged however much like the pawn shop sold him or gave him for the ring or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. That's how much the robber has to pay back in court fees and restitution, so the pawn shop gets their original money back.
Oh, I had no idea. That's really interesting.
Yeah. So that's
Huh.
a little deal that they have worked out for the pawn shop, because if not,
Mm-hmm.
then the pawn shop, like every time they buy something stolen, which is probably a dozen times a day, um, they would go bankrupt because they would keep losing money. So yeah, so
Mm-hmm.
the robber, in their restitution and court fees, that's part of reimbursing the pawn shop.
All right. Yeah, so Tom's gonna get the money for it. So Kip goes home and Andy is gone. And she calls him and says she doesn't feel safe around him anymore, and she called the police. And they come in and arrest him. And he wakes up and it was just a dream, but also not a dream because the police are really coming.
Mm-hmm.
And he puts on his jacket and he finds there's a gun in his pocket.
And he deduces for whatever reason, that this gun is the gun that shot the old people in bed that he stole the necklaces from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which to this point, I don't think we even knew how they were killed. We just
No,
knew
they
that they
never
were killed.
said how they died. They just said that they
Mm-hmm.
were murdered. But I guess like shooting someone is probably the most logical choice in this scenario.
Mm-hmm.
Although it would kind of be loud because the gun that he had, it definitely didn't have a silencer on it.
Yeah, the neighbors probably would have heard the
Mm-hmm.
noise.
So,
Oh well.
oh
Anyway, so
well.
he decides to go looking for Andy, and he goes to her mother's house. And he says, he's there looking for Andy, and she's like, "Is this some sort of a sick joke? Andy died of cancer 2 years ago."
Yeah.
So
And so Kip is like, "Can I see a picture of her?" And the mom is like, "Get out of here with your torment."
yes.
So he goes back to the pawn shop, but Tom doesn't have the money that's owed to him. But he's like, "Hey, I don't have your money, but I have something better. Here's your wanted poster with your face on it."
Right. Which, it was a police sketch, but Tom says they searched your apartment and they know you're the Daisy burglar. So wouldn't the police have a picture of him that they can use on the flyer instead of a sketch?
You would think, yeah, because they could
Yeah.
even just pull like his driver's license picture. I don't know what
Mm-hmm.
kind of technology they had back then, but
Right.
if they are going through his apartment, I'm sure there's a picture of him and Andy somewhere in that apartment
Yeah.
that they could have used.
Mm-hmm. Well, Springwood PD is not that on top of things.
Yeah. So then
Uh,
Kip tells Tom, like, "Hey, I think I'm being framed. Also, here's the gun that was used in the murder."
right.
And Tom tells him, "Okay, stay here. I'm gonna go get your money. Like, don't even look outside. Just stay here and lay low." Um, but instead of doing that, Kip goes back to the scene of the crime to go into the safe again for something, and sees the painting. It was of the mom and dad, and I guess their daughter. Well, the
Mm-hmm.
daughter has a very distinguishable birthmark on the side of her neck, and that kind of like a light shines or a light bulb goes off above Kip's head, and he's like, "Oh, who else has a birthmark on their neck that I just love and adore so much? My girlfriend Andy."
And then I guess that was a dream, and he snaps out of it,
Mm-hmm.
and Andy's standing there next to Tom, and she's got a gun, and she's not Andy. She is Claire, the
Mm-hmm.
daughter of the couple that was murdered.
So basically, she tells him in a very like Scooby-Doo ending. The villain tells her entire plan, everything that happened. Kip is like, "Don't shoot me. Like, we've been together for 2 years. There had like some of this had to be real." And she was like, "Yeah, some of it was nice, but also I'm shooting you." So before she shoots him, Kip tries to get Tom to like intervene and be like, "Hey, can you possibly save my life?" And Tom is like, "Well, I can either go down for the murder of her parents, or I could spend the rest of my days with a beautiful woman and lots of money." So it becomes very clear that those two are in cahoots together and that they've had this plan this whole time.
And then she shoots Kip, and the cops are arriving, and then she mentions like, "Oh, Kip came here and shot you, and then I shot him." Basically, Tom gets shot too. Yeah.
Yeah, the plan was, or their cover story was, Kip took her hostage and brought her to the pawn shop, and he shoots Tom, and after he shoots Tom, she gets the gun away and shoots Kip. And Tom is like, "Wait, I'm not getting shot. That wasn't a part of our plan." And Andy's like, "Oh, but it is." And she shoots him,
Mm-hmm.
and that's that.
Yeah. And then Freddy says like, "That's my kind of woman," and almost makes me wish I were still alive.
Yeah. So, how did you like this one?
I thought it was okay. I think I would have liked it more if it hadn't been right after episode 6, because it was like two episodes in a row about a woman manipulating and killing people for money. So it just seemed, just coming right after that episode, it seemed a little repetitive, at least the second half.
Yeah.
But the first half I thought was pretty good. It was fun and different, and I liked the magic mime.
Yeah. I watched these back to back, and for this second one, I didn't find it as good as the 6th episode, so I was having a hard time getting through it. But while I was watching the second half of this one, I kept thinking like, where are your superhero mime powers from the first half? Why aren't you like pretending to dig a hole that Andy falls into or something like that? You know, like you had these powers in the first half. What happened to them?
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that's all.
Yeah, and I wonder, like, I mean, he must be making good money from the robberies. So why is he also a street performer?
Maybe that's his passion.
Okay,
Yeah.
true enough. Yeah.
I mean, I make crappy horror movies because it's my passion. I don't care about making money.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, good point. I
Okay.
guess you can't rob houses during the day, so he needs, something fun to go do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe miming is like his therapy. That's how he copes with all his illegal activities.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, yeah, it was just all right. I think it was probably one of my least favorites of the series so far, or from this season, I mean.
Yeah, it's definitely not one of the stronger ones.
Yeah.
But I liked the ending of the shock jock part.
Yeah.
Where he gets the rake in the throat and can't talk anymore.
Yeah, I thought that was good. Thank you so much for listening. Please join us next week when we talk about Season 2, Episode 8, Bloodlines, where Freddy tries to visit the Grand Canyon.